It was 7 years ago when Chord Electronics released the Mojo. And I think of all of Chord's products, acronym type names, the Mojo or Mobile Joy is definitely their best one. And the Mojo made a huge impression on the audiophile world, really carving out a reference status of its own for its sound quality, for a portable headphone amplifier and DAC at its price point. But 7 years is a long time in digital audio. So with the Mojo 2, have Chord given us a quantum leap forward in performance over the Mojo Mk1? Probably the Mojo 2 is an awesome bit of kit. If you're a Mojo user, you've probably already made your mind up that you're going to upgrade to the Mojo 2. And I actually think you're right. I actually think it's a no-brainer upgrade because, of course, Chord have given us better performance with the Mojo 2. We kind of expect that. But they've also added some very nice features that I think make the Mojo 2 stand out, but definitely or especially stand out to Mojo Mk1 users. If you speak the language of Chord DAC, then features like DC coupling and digital DC servo might get you excited. Also, the just shy of 41,000 tap lengths compared to the 27,000 with the Mk1. So that is obviously a lot more. And if you don't speak DAC, you can still draw on the comparison to the more expensive and excellent Chord Qtest DAC, because the Mojo 2 is not quite at that level, but it's much, much closer. So that means the Mojo 2 is a really powerful digital audio device that you can obviously just hold in your hand really easily. It's not that heavy, and you could just slip it into your pocket without too much of that "are you pleased to see me" bulge going on. Form factor wise, the Mojo 2 is very similar to the Mk1, which I'm fine with because if it ain't broke, but there are technical reasons for this too, such as you can use your existing Chord Poly with the Mojo 2 in the same way of connecting the two units together. And I don't have a Poly, so I was very happy to see Chord have added a USB-C socket in addition to the 2 micro USB ports. So there's now 2 inputs for data and still the 1 for charging. All jokes aside, I like the fact that I could just grab a USB-C cable, connect the Mojo 2 to my phone or my tablet, fire up Qobuz, plug in some headphones, and I was away listening to great music, and I do mean away. The Mojo 2 grabbed me straight away with its full and punchy, really solid sound that's uber clean and rhythmical. Bass is strong, tuneful and articulate, and there is plenty of drive there. Vocals are strong and engaging with just a touch of forgiveness, and the treble is maybe a touch dark, but very precise with a nice bit of sparkle, and most importantly, it's totally grain free. In fact, it's a very engaging overall listen that, dare I say it, is actually much more analog sounding than you might expect for a product of this type, and definitely price, which is £449. So a bit more money than the Mojo Mk1, but not a crazy amount more considering how the world is these days. 7 years in terms of time difference and obviously the actual differences. Because here is the interesting bit. I still hold the Mojo Mk1 in my head as this very excellent sounding unit, because it is. But after several longer listening sessions with the Mojo 2 and then going back to the Mk1, yeah, the differences are really very significant. I want to start by talking about one of the new added features, and that is crossfeed. And crossfeed is a system where it's trying to better mimic the listening experience of listening to stereo speakers rather than listening to really two separated mono devices in either IEMs, in-ear monitors or headphones. And if you do a quick on-off comparison, the difference can seem quite subtle, but leave it on, listen to music for longer periods, then turn it off, and you might find yourself missing it, because I know I did. And the real, I suppose, impact or power or effectiveness of crossfeed really hit home to me at the end of my first round of A/B listening comparisons between the Mojo 1 and the Mojo 2 across lots of different headphones. And it was only at the end that I realized that I accidentally had left crossfeed on for this comparison. And while I was doing this comparison, I was adamant and convinced that it was a totally night and day difference between the Mojo Mk1 and Mk2, with the two being significantly sounding much better. But after I realised, obviously my mistake, turn the crossfeed off. The difference between the two units is still very significant, but obviously the overall listening experience changes quite drastically. So that really just hit home to me how well the crossfeed system, circuit, whatever it is, has been implemented with the Mojo 2, and it's now a system that's definitely on my radar that I'll definitely listen to more in the future. Being critical of the crossfeed system, yes, it seemed to work better with some headphones more than others, or just liked it more with those headphones. And I did find that maybe the bass could get just a little bit thick with the crossfeed engaged, but no problem because we can tune that out. But after doing another round of listening tests with lots of different headphones, obviously now with the crossfeed turned off, I noticed that maybe the Mojo Mk1 could initially, to some audiophiles anyway, sound more attractive, more appealing because it has a more bold sound, a bit more pumped up in its bass. So if you only really listen to a very limited selection of music, just for a very quick A/B comparison, I think you could be fooled into thinking that the Mojo Mk1 actually sounds better. But listen for longer, listen to the Mark II for a longer listening session. Listen to how much more articulate, how much more expressive, how much more free the bass is, and how much more resolution there is there in general, but especially in the bass. You'll realise that I think the Mojo Mk1 is actually, yeah, it's pumped up in sound, but it's very compressed. The whole soundstage sounds really quite compressed and tense, with the Mojo 2 sounding much more capable in all of the important sonic areas. One big one being transparency, but also it's much smoother and much more musical, and like I mentioned, more engaging, more relaxing, much easier to listen to for longer periods of time. So how would you break that down? You could say, well, it sounds much more expensive. Before we move on, I want to say a huge thank you to Electromod because they loaned me lots of different headphones for this review, and I wanted to test the Mojo 2 with headphones at different impedances, but I also wanted to really be able to test what I think is the most exciting new feature, and that is what are calling the world's first lossless DSP, or what they're calling UHD DSP, or maybe it's just tone controls with no signal degradation. Straight away, I can see some audiophiles being really excited by this feature, whereas others I'm sure will be asking questions of that lofty claim. And if you're an audiophile who's used to, very complex DSP solutions, maybe Roon's DSP or Dirac Live, then maybe the limited to 4 frequency band DSP of the Mojo 2 won't be at the level of fine tuning that you're used to. But I think for everybody else, the simplicity and the effectiveness of this DSP solution will be a big deal. By simplicity, I want to show you this card that came with the Mojo 2. It's a quick reference guide, and I found this invaluable at first with my goldfish memory, so don't lose it or throw it away by mistake. And this is also why there are now 4 small buttons with the Mojo 2 compared to the 3 larger ones with the Mark I. To make DSP adjustments, it's as easy as pressing the menu button until its colour corresponds with the frequency range that you want to adjust, such as red for 20 Hz or deep bass, yellow for 125 Hz, upper bass or maybe very low vocals, green for 3 kHz, which is an interesting frequency range to adjust, but it's in the main vocal region, and lastly light blue, which is 20 kHz, so high treble or really the air region. And there is a huge amount of adjustment available from -9 to +9 decibels. So that's an insane amount of DSP adjustment that we can apply. So you could, really boost the 20 Hz, really boost the 20 kHz for a very boom tiz sound. Or maybe you could make it all about the bass and no treble. Yep, Megan Trainor, she's already ordered one. In all seriousness, I think having some flexibility to tune your sound is really awesome. And I tested the DSP options across all of the different headphones I had here, and I could tweak better sound out of all of them to me, if only by a small amount. But small can still be significant. For example, the Dan Clark Ether. I boosted 20 Hz by 1 dB, reduced the 125 Hz by 1 dB, boosted the 3 kHz by 1 dB and 20 kHz by 2 dB. And I think that helped to give these headphones more presence up top, for them to deliver vocals that sounded more immediate, and also helped to reduce a little bit of thickening in the upper bass that was probably caused by the crossfeed system, which for me helped to reduce some of that ear claustrophobia and fatigue. In stark contrast, the AKG Q701 sounded really low end, lackluster compared to the ether. So I raised the 125 Hz by 1 dB and the 20 Hz by 2 dB and left the rest alone. And this helped to tonally saturate their sound and add more warmth and fullness that I think was missing big time. I could then enjoy these very affordable headphones as they were sounding very decent now. Otherwise, I would not have been able to listen to them for very long because they sounded too lean for me and a bit shouty. So the long and short of it is, I think the new DSP feature in the Mojo 2 is very useful. It's also very easy to use it to match the bolder sound of the Mark 1 while still having all of the sonic benefits of the Mark 2. So for me, that is a win-win. 2 wins, Mojo 2. Oh, I'll get my coat. Another, I think, very useful feature is with the charging circuit that allows you to leave the Mojo 2 plugged in all the time without harming the batteries. And that will be huge for audiophiles that use the Mojo 2 as a standalone DAC in a hi-fi system. And the spec of the Mojo 2 being so close to the Qtist for half the money obviously makes it very compelling. But this is where maybe one of the features that you might be used to hasn't moved across. There is no line level or DAC mode with the Mojo 2, which I thought was an interesting omission. So I actually spoke to Chord about this, and what they said is that some users were accidentally activating the line level mode, which is really putting the Mojo into full volume. And I suppose if you did that by mistake with a pair of headphones or IEMs on, you're going to damage the headphones and maybe your ears. So Chord have said you can still use the Mojo 2 as a standalone DAC, but now you just need to manually adjust the volume, manually set the volume to how you need it. And then when you turn the Mojo 2 on the next time, it auto keeps, or it remembers the volume that you set it at, which is something to pay attention to and be careful of course. But I actually think that's a more elegant solution. I like the idea of just turning it on, set and forget type of situation, rather than turning it on, having to press a couple of buttons to put it into a certain mode. Yeah, so for me, this is not really an omission. It's actually a step forward, I think, in just usability. And for sound quality, obviously everything that I've said about the Mojo 2 will carry over into your hi-fi system. So a clean, punchy, smooth, rounded, musical, transparent sound, which obviously has huge appeal for a DAC sound for a hi-fi system at its price. And there is one more thing I want to talk about, and that is not something I could test despite owning one. Chord have designed the Mojo 2's digital coaxial inputs to be able to receive the full upsampled 768 kHz dual data signal from their Hugo M scaler. And that seems crazy for so many reasons. Firstly, crazy for sound quality, because the M scaler is awesome. And I own one, I've lived with one for years, and I know it will sharpen up, clean up, and massively improve the musical delivery from the Mojo 2. But it also costs £3,750. So it's difficult to compute those maths, really, that Chord might think that someone would spend that kind of money to improve the sound of a 450, give or take, pound DAC. But it also makes me think, now this is purely wild speculation, but it also makes me think that maybe we'll see a more affordable, maybe Mojo-sized M scaler in the future. Because if we did, I think that would be huge for so many audiophiles. But purely speculation. It seems quite a realistic prediction to make. But let me know down below in the comment section, what do you think? Do you think we will see one of those in the future, and would it be of interest to you? But what about negatives? Well, no balanced headphone outputs could be a negative for some. No MQA supports could also be a negative for some Tidal users. Another negative for me is I found the smaller buttons a touch tricky to access when the Mojo 2 is in its case. It's fine when you're pressing one at a time, but when you have to press two together to either reset or lock the DSP, I found it a touch tricky with my clumsy fat fingers, but I am reaching there. So now I'm sure you will agree with me why I said at the beginning of the video that I felt the Mojo 2 was a no-brainer upgrade for the Mojo Mk1 owner, because Chord have given us lots more in terms of sound quality, but also lots of really useful new features from a product that is the exact same size, same form factor, for pretty much the same price. Given 7 years, inflation, the way the world is right now, shortages of supply, and the inevitable price hikes. And you know what? I think I have to applaud Chord for that, because the Mojo 2 really is an awesome bit of kit. And is it a quantum leap better than the Mk1? For some audiophiles, it probably will be. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope you've found it useful and helpful. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, and obviously subscribe to the Pursuit of Perfect System YouTube channel if you haven't already. Of course you have. There's lots more excellent reviews coming soon. Hope you noticed too. On the volume back there, number 2. Hope some of you noticed that. I'll see you all soon. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye. Bye.